In this video, we're going to be learning a bit more about the MOI-A study for osteogenesis imperfecta with Professor Nick Bishop and Professor Judith Cohen. Firstly, could you tell us a bit about yourselves and the study that you're working on?
Hi, I'm Judith Cohen. I'm a Professor of Clinical Trials and the Director of the Hull Health Trials Unit, which is based at the University of Hull within the Hull York Medical School. My background initially was in biochemistry and lab-based research, and then I moved into clinical research after some postdoctoral work, and I've been working in clinical trials for a while now. As a trials unit, we support a number of different studies, so we have quite a broad portfolio, and our main remit is supporting the conduct and the implementation of protocols into practice, and very much get involved at the writing the application stage and kind of getting things ready for funding.
So I'm Nick Bishop. I'm Professor of Paediatric Bone Disease in the University of Sheffield. I've been in Sheffield since the late 1990s. Before that, I worked for a couple of years in Montreal with Francis Glorieux in the Shriners Hospital in McGill University there, which was really where I learnt how to look after kids with bone disease. So I've spent the last nearly 30 years looking after children, older adolescents, occasionally young adults with different sorts of bone disease, but particularly osteogenesis imperfecta. And I've been lucky enough to be involved in a number of clinical studies looking to see whether medicines can make the lives of children, particularly with OI, better. And then most recently, this study that we're currently engaged with Losartan, which is an old drug used for high blood pressure, but which we think might work in OI. A study that we're calling MOI-A, Matrix-Directed Therapy in Osteogenesis Imperfecta for older adolescents and adults, because one of the side effects of this drug may be useful, basically, in improving things for folk who've got OI. And we're particularly interested to see whether pain and fatigue improve, and whether it affects the speed with which bone is created and destroyed in these folk.
And what are the potential benefits of this study?
So I think, as I've mentioned already, some of the problems that folk with OI suffer from are pain and fatigue. Some of that's due to fractures and things that are happening with the bones, but sometimes it seems to come from the muscles and other places in the body. And the medicine, Losartan, we think affects a specific pathway, a set of chemical reactions, if you like, that could be responsible for some of that feeling tired and in pain, at the same time as it affects the rate at which bone is eaten away and then replaced. So it's all part and parcel of the same thing. So the potential benefit for participating in this study to an individual would be that they would feel better. We're only treating people for 24 weeks, so the likelihood that we'll have a major impact on things like fracture is pretty small. And we're not studying a large number of patients. This is, if you like, a bit of a pilot study to try and work out whether we're going, along the right lines or whether it's a complete waste of time. But we're having to do it in a very detailed way to make sure that we absolutely know one way or another whether it's worthwhile investing a huge amount of time and energy and money in doing a big what they phase 3 study, which would look at fractures more closely.
I suppose where this trial is positioned when you're thinking about developing a new drug or looking for drugs for different treatments. So this kind of project, so we're calling it a drug repurposing project, because it's a drug that's already used quite routinely, but for people with high blood pressure. But we think it's got the potential to be useful in patients with OI. And so this is, as Nick said, it's an early phase study. So we would call it a phase 2 study, which is kind of a smaller scale study that you do to get that initial evidence to see whether it has got the potential to work. If we wanted to actually get a change in licensing for this drug, we would probably have to do a much bigger study with a lot more participants, where we'd be looking to see whether we could actually show a definite change in clinical outcomes. And then we'd have to go through a process to be able to get a change in licensing of that drug. So it's usually quite a long process to go through to get a drug changed and used for a different indication. One of the advantages for this is by doing it as a repurposing project, we are able to come in a little bit further along where you would if it was like a drug development pathway. So if you're having to develop it completely from scratch, then you'd have to do a body of work first to show that it was safe to be used in patients, but also get some of that initial evidence. But we're able to use some of that data that was already available from its use in for people with high blood pressure, and so we're able to come a little bit further in the pathway. It still means there's quite a lot that needs to be done to get that change, but this is a really important study to give us that first evidence to see whether it's worth going on and doing that additional work and trying to get change in license.
And I guess the other thing to add in is that if we look at across the world, OI occurs in every population. It's not just in the Western world or countries that can afford to pay huge amounts of money for new medicines. Losartan, because it's been around for a long time, is now what they call off patent and made by drug companies who called so-called generic drug manufacturers. So they've basically the patent on the original drug has expired, and now people can produce it, but far, far cheaper than used to be the case. So the average cost, for instance, of giving somebody losartan is a few pence a week. Literally, it's pennies. Whereas if you're thinking about one of the new medicines that are being suggested, one of the antibody treatments or the infusions or whatever, you're talking about tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds. And that's just out of reach for a lot of people in countries that aren't as fortunate, say, as the UK and other European countries or the United States and Canada and Australia. So potentially, this could have a global impact if it was shown to be a medicine that provided some help, because it would be able to be used pretty much everywhere, and it would be cheap, accessible, and potentially useful.
How has the study been shaped by the OI community?
When we first designed the study, we needed to make sure that because of the drug that we're using, and we're using it at some different doses, that obviously the key thing for us is patient safety. So there are a number of things that we have to have in for patients coming in to have blood tests and to check the safety of the medicine that's being used. We also wanted to look at things like the effect on bone, which means people have to come in for scans to have either a DEXA or a specialist kind of scan called a HRP-QCT to look at the effect on bone. So it did mean when we looked at it overall, there was quite a lot of study visits for a participant who's thinking about taking part in the study. And we realised this generally can be a barrier anyway, but also we had some really useful discussions with the OI community around this, and there are additional challenges for them. Some of them have more reduced mobility, which makes it more difficult to travel. They might need a carer to come with them as well. And also the age group that we're looking at, they are generally in work and then just trying to find times off to come and do a study visit can be a real barrier to people being able to take part. So we looked at a number of things in which we could try and change the protocol. We had a meeting in Bologna in Italy, where we did have participants from the OI community who came and had these discussions with us, which was really useful and to input into these discussions of what we could maybe change. So we had a look to see if there were any more things that we could do remotely. So like doing a safety phone call instead of getting someone to have to come in for a visit. We looked at the scanning and decided that actually for the main outcomes, we could make some of that optional. So the specialist vein scan, we made that an optional thing so that people didn't have to come in to one of the centres to have that scan, which was less trouble for the participant. And we wanted to make sure that there was a quality of life measurement in there that was specific for OI, and that was, again, something that was important to the patients, to have something that was a patient-centred outcome that they wanted to use. Overall, we were trying to basically simplify the protocol and make it a little bit easier for people to think about taking part in the study, while still maintaining, obviously, the overall safety of the study, which is key.
And the big change, I think, that two changes we've made. One was to allow the inclusion of people who had previously had some treatment with bisphosphonate drugs. Originally, we'd said none at all. And it became clear that that was just making life far too difficult and unrealistic in terms of recruitment. So we looked at the available literature and said, okay, well, if it's a long time since you had an intravenous bisphosphonate or one of the long-acting ones, then we'll take you in if you have a long washout period, 10 years. But there are other bisphosphonates. There's one in particular called risedronate, which is used in some centres, which actually gets out of the body very quickly. And so we were able to sort of tweak the protocol to allow people to participate if being off that for a year or more. And the other thing we did that I think really made life easier for patients was to open a lot more centres so that it was easier for them to get somewhere local. And since we've done that, we've seen a surge in recruitment, which has been very welcome. More than I'd hoped for, to be quite honest, and that's been great, because it means that the hard work that everyone's put into this, and particularly the hard work on the part of the patients who participated, is now much more likely to provide us some reliable answers. Because if we'd finished the study and only recruited a handful of people, we wouldn't have got an answer. Now I think we're pretty much in a position where we are going to get an answer. But the more patients we can get to participate, the more reliable that answer will be, and the more informative it will be in terms of moving to the next step if we do.
Yeah, definitely. Opening the new sites has been key. So we've opened a number of new sites in the UK, and we're also looking at whether we can expand to further sites within the EU. So at the moment, there's only sites in Italy, but we're looking to see whether we can open Netherlands and Denmark, which again would open up the opportunity for much wider participation from patients with OI from around Europe, so that we can get to that target number that we want. Alongside that, another key thing we've been trying to do is looking at the information that we give to patients when they're thinking about taking part in the study, and how we can sort of better promote the study overall. For drug studies, obviously people have to give their informed consent to take part in that. And due to the regulatory requirements, we do have to give quite a lot of detailed information within that information sheet, so that people can fully understand the potential risks and benefits, but also fully what we're asking them to do as part of that study. So it can make it quite a lengthy document. And now we also have to put in things about data around GDPR. So you can end up with a very kind of bulky document, which can be a little bit off-putting. So we have worked again with our sort of patient contributors to have a look at that information, and tried to make shorter summaries that we can give as either a starting point or alongside that more detailed information, more visual way, so using like an infographic and distilling that information down to the key messages that we think we want to get across to people to see whether they are willing to participate in the study.
And lastly, do you have any updates on where the study is at now?
As Nick said, we've actually had quite a good surgeon recruitment recently, which has really helped. So we're trying to get 30 participants, and that's across both the UK and the EU. We're currently at 12, so 10 recruited from the UK and 2 recruited in Italy. And through the opening of new sites, we've actually got quite a number that are scheduled to have that sort of first visit and to have that review of eligibility over the next couple of weeks. And we hope that after the Christmas break, then in the new year, we'll get those patients starting to come in. So initially, in the UK, we were only planning to have 3 sites. We were going to have 2 sites in Sheffield, one which is the Children's Hospital, one which is the adults, and then one nearer London, which was Royal Stanmore. However, now we have got, as we said, we've opened a lot more sites. So now we've managed to open a wider geographical spread. So we've got sites open in Liverpool, Edinburgh, Aberdeen, and Glasgow, and we're hoping that maybe Cambridge and Guy's and St Thomas's will come on as well in the new year. So hopefully wherever people are based in the UK, if we do have expressions of interest that can come into the central team, we can try and match you up with a local site, and then obviously they have to go through the eligibility and do the clinical visits at their site, but we can help try and sort of pass you on to the right person to discuss it wherever you're from.
I think the other thing is sort of we've been trying to make people aware of the study through a variety of different routes. So the Brittle Bone Society have been very helpful, but one of my ex-patients also approached me and said, could they put it out on their Facebook group, which also resulted in a number of queries coming into the unit in Hull about where the nearest unit to them would be. And we've had help from other centres like Bristol saying we're very happy to hand out information to patients who ask about this. Can you give us an infographic and things like that? So the community generally, both the patient community and the medical community, have been incredibly supportive of this study, for which we are really grateful. And we hope that it will mean that at the end of the day, we do get a robust, reliable answer that we can use to guide us going forwards.
Thank you so much for watching, and we really do hope that after listening to Nick and Judith, you feel much more informed about the MOI-A study for osteogenesis imperfecta. If you'd like any more information, or if you would like to take part, please do feel free to email the email address shown on the screen now.